Some of this is probably road before the amalgamated connection. Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
All right, good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to you all as we commence this council activity update, an opportunity to find out what's been happening from our different departments and also what they're going to be doing over the next few months. So we look forward to that. I've been given this some thought, and I thought this might be the last one I chair for a while, because what I'd like to do is give others the opportunity to chair these activity updates. So yeah, we'll talk to you councillors a bit more about that as to who wants to put hands up and share the joy. So anyway, we'll get things underway, and starting off with the assets group update. So fairly important, given that they spend 3/4 of our budget each year, but we'll hand over to who wants to start things. Josh Rendell. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Mayor Gotcha. So in front of you was a report from the assets group regarding the activities that we're currently undertaking, some of the risks and opportunities that we perceive coming forward, as well as what we're anticipating on undertaking over the next coming 3-month period or so. For the sake of time, I'll take the report as read and hand over to questions.
Should we turn that on? Questions as we work our way through, starting off with the property department. Any questions on that? Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mika. Yeah, look, I have a couple of questions on property. First of all, I noticed a comment about the community housing and the increase in rentals and so on, going up to 85% and the like. And the fact that you're working collaboratively with the Ministry of Social Development and holding open days and so on. What I don't see here is anyone saying, how did this happen? How did it get overlooked for so long? And in the same context, what sort of supervision and oversight has there been of, well, is it our business to look at the power lines and street lights at Holmes Wharf? I noticed that Network Waitaki have done an inspection. What's going to be the cost of that? And equally, what's the big cost escalation for the slipway? Well, all those are on the first page. And on the next page over, there's reference to the carpenter's red shed in Oamaru Harbour, with renewal of rusted corrugated iron, rotten timber. There would appear to have been, again, a lack of oversight, a lack of proper maintenance. So to what extent have these things been actually overlooked or not managed properly? Equally, what's the cost of the carpenter's red shed upgrades going to be? And are they tenanted, and are we generating any income from them?
Thank you very much for the questions. I'll try to work through them. You may have to remind me of some of them. Sorry, I didn't make notes. So first and foremost, community housing. There were some tenancies where we did do rental increases as they went, but there's a lot of people that have been in the units for a very long period of time that weren't looked at. So in a respect, yes, it was overlooked. The last adjustment that we made, I believe, was in 2019. So we're looking at a kind of a 3-year period of increases rather than us having done it on an annual basis. Moving forward, we will make it so it's an annual basis rather than undertaking it at a 3-yearly review. With respect to the renovation of Holmes Wharf, Graham may be able to speak further towards it, but we do own the power lines and the lighting on the wharf. It isn't an electrical network utility asset. It is in fact ours. The poles that are there are, beyond useful life. We do need to replace them if we want to continue to have lighting at the site, as well as having power at the site. Given the wharf is used by commercial fishermen and the like, they do require power. And for safety reasons, we do require lighting on the site. It's a well-used wharf at night. Not having lighting is not something that we really see as feasible. We are working with Network Wide Taking to try to bring the price down as much as we possibly can. All of that is being funded out of the renovation of Holmes Wharf budget. So there is an existing budget for it. With respect to the carpenter sheds, the renovation of the red sheds was an annual plan project. It was approved through the long-term plan and has become due this year. So we're undertaking that work in accordance with the project budget that was established for this year. It's one of only, there's several red sheds, obviously. The rot is quite well developed. Some of those sheds are tenanted, some are not. There's some deferred maintenance, certainly, on a number of the sheds. But we are trying through this project to try to bring them up to scratch so we can try to get some better utilisation of those assets. And I'm not too sure on what the price escalations are with respect to the slipway. I believe it's on the cradle itself. Steel prices have moved a lot. Engineering costs have moved quite a lot. But I'll see if Brian has some further commentary on that.
Thank you, Josh. Just in relation to the slipway, as Josh has alluded to, there's been a significant increase in the steel prices. When we went out for the first round of procurement, we only got one response. So we've actually gone back to some other engineering companies, and we're certainly hoping to get a lower price to come back through to get that within budget. So we're quietly confident that will happen. We'll certainly know within the next fortnight, and we can report back once we know a bit further on that. I think Josh has alluded to the answering the other questions with the other assets, but if there's any other questions, I can answer those.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. Just back to community housing, I was interested in the feedback or the impact that that's had on tenants and the work that you've been doing in that space with them.
Thank you for the question. Yes, it has been ongoing. Late last week, I think it was Thursday, there was consultation held with those tenants at a couple of our different blocks. So we had a bit of an open day where people could come in. They had the government department there to see what help they could offer them. And apparently it went down very, very well. I wasn't there myself, but I think the tenants certainly appreciated the work that had been done leading up to this and having the offer of support that a lot of them weren't aware they could actually receive some extra benefits in what they're currently getting. So there's generally seems to be quite a bit of satisfaction, even though there is a reasonable increase going on. So yes, nothing to be concerned about.
Thank you. Just a quick question, just on the replacing of the power on Holmes Wharf. See pros and cons of whether we, reuse or put new poles in and have it overhead versus putting it underground. But if we are undergrounding it, are we also taking the opportunity to put some of those other services into that trench and make sure that we are future-proofing that as much as possible?
So just in regard to that, yes, it was all part of the bigger renovation of Holmes Wharf project, which is all budgeted, and the new underground supply certainly will cater for future-proofing everything out to the new sheds. So there will be fibre ducts going in, so we can run fibre if it's needed. There will be pumped sewer pipes that will go in, so if we have a restaurant or alternative uses in the buildings, we can cater for that. There'll be a new water line going as well. We're actually putting a dummy duct in also in case there's anything else in the next 30 to 50 years we need to run through. We feel it's better to run an underground supply through because the overhead lines and with the sea, they would just get pretty badly impacted as far as maintenance of that asset. Our new street lights, we're proposing on the southern side of the wharf, so it will light up the actual wharf and the boat area where the commercial berth holders use. So there will be some consultation with the Harbour Area Committee with a wee bit of design coming out hopefully within the next fortnight.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on property? Councillor Holding.
Thanks, I'm through the chair to put it to ground. Under risk and opportunities, we have the safety user group at Oamaru Airport, are we seeing that as a risk or opportunity, or is it an opportunity to bring someone else in to find out?
Just an answer to that, we do see it as an opportunity. It's really important for the airport to be aware of the risks out there. So running more robust, frequent health and safety user group meetings is really beneficial to all the users and council to understand exactly what's happening. So we are certainly aiming to have those every 3 months, just to keep on top of any issues. It is a very busy airport out there, so we need to take a good proactive interest in that. So I do see that as a fantastic opportunity for council to be involved.
Anyone else? Councillor Hopkins again?
Yeah, look, just one other very quick question, also under risks and opportunities. The observation, repairs and resilience work, we're saying that we've missed out earlier on the business case because of the North Island weather events, and now we're saying with regard to this, that in terms of our repairs and resilience, the scope of works may need to be revisited to ensure that the work can be completed at budget. So in terms of getting the track back then, what's going to be missed out?
It's a really good question for the recreation team when they join us.
Oh, sorry, okay.
So anything else on property? Okay, thank you very much, Grant. Appreciate your input there. Josh, we're moving on to recreation. Do you want to answer the observation question there?
I can answer that question. Thank you. Yes, with respect to the Alps to Ocean business case for moving the track off trail, the Ministry for Business Innovation and Employment has indicated that no further funding will be forthcoming in the next, I believe it's a 3-year period. They're fully oversubscribed due to repairs and resilience works and other trails due to predominantly the North Island flooding, as well as more significant flooding and weather events elsewhere. We were successful in receiving $500,000 from MB earlier this year for repairs and resilience works to the Alps to Ocean. We did have a contract out with a contractor. That contractor has since had some staffing issues and fell behind in the works, so they've handed their contract in, and we're now engaging someone else to undertake the works. Obviously, initially we engaged the lowest price contractor. We're now having to move to not the lowest price contractor, so the money's only going to go so far. So we're going to have to revisit the scope of works purely because their prices are a little bit more expensive than the first ones were.
Yeah. The question is, what at this stage do you have any idea of what's not going to get done?
I don't have that level of detail to hand. Apologies. I believe we're still working through that as we negotiate a revised contract with a new contractor. Once we do become aware of it, we can report through.
Councillor Percival.
Yeah, just following up on Jim's question, which was going to be my question as well. But the thing is, you say repairs within the timeframes from our funding, which you just explained. So what you're saying is that we do the work and then we apply for the funding. We're not, you say then we got to be sure the work's completed to budget. Whose budget is that? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand, because if we have a budget for it without knowing the funding we're getting, and we have to apply for the funding after we've paid for the work, it seems a bit cart before the horse to me. Or am I completely wrong in my estimate?
Sorry, I may have misspoke there and confused the issue. We did receive a $500,000 grant from MB to undertake repairs and resilience works. Council also provided some funding from its emergency fund to undertake some repairs and resilience works. So we know how much funding we have to undertake the works. It's now a matter of matching what works we can do to the funding. So we've got a funding envelope and we're trying to do as much as we possibly can within the funding envelope, as opposed to doing a whole lot of work and then looking for money elsewhere. The issue that we have with future funding from MB is that they're unlikely to be looking to upgrade trails or take trails off track because they're fully allocated just in repairs and resilience funding.
I'm just speaking as one of the council's representatives on the Alps Ocean Joint Committee. It's a major problem that the New Zealand Cycle Trails only get $8 million a year, and that they are fully subscribed trying to fix the all of the damage that's happened in the North Island. So as far as that goes, it's really up to us to try and lobby government to put more into that fund, because there's things can happen every year or any year in different parts of the country, and there's just not enough money there. Plus, also we want to continue upgrading some of the sections of track on Alps to Ocean. So we want to make sure there is enough funding for that. Part of the problem is the fact that we've got to apply for the funding, get the funding before we can get on with the work, because it's meant in this case that it's been a very long wait for damaged sections of track to get the attention, and just a bit disappointing that the first contractor's backed out. But hopefully we can get on and get the track back to the standard it should be. We're hoping to build some resilience into the track with some of this funding, and whether that might be part of the bit that's curtailed because of increased pricing remains to be seen. But obviously it's in the hands of staff to do the negotiation and get the best that they can. Did you have another question?
Well, really, it's just a comment. It just, to me, when there's a shortfall, it's the Waitaki ratepayer that's paying with no cost recovery. So even though there's always examples of economic development and welfare, but to me, we're on a road to nowhere when ratepayer money is going to something, as I say again, with no recovery.
Thank you. Councillor McCain.
Yeah, I see in the contract performance maintenance, that contract for Parks and Gardens is only a 12-month one. It was renewed this year. So is that process starting now? When does that take place? Would be the first question. And secondly, my memory's a bit slow, but the tenders for the Gardens water play project, have we got an idea of a figure of that before we even put the tenders out? And where I'm coming from, bearing in mind that we have budget blowouts and anything else, do we actually need to do it? And could someone tell me what the planning for the improvements work at Cape Wombrau is, please?
Mr. Rendell.
Thank you. With respect to the Parks and Reserves contract, yes, we're currently reviewing the existing contract with a view to try to optimise some areas, de-risk some areas, to try to reduce pricing in the overall tender. We're also looking at where the best placement of some activities is, whether it's within that contract or within other contracts that we already have out. We'll be coming back to council shortly with a briefing to discuss some of what we've looked at in terms of the contract, and then be seeking approval to advertise a revised contract out to the market. So yes, that work is carrying on. With respect to the water play gardens, yes, I would expect that we have an estimate of what it's likely to be costing us. I don't have that figure to hand, but generally we do know roughly what it's going to be costing before we go into tender. Though at the moment, with the volatile pricing that we do receive, we are often surprised at how much these things do cost. And sorry, I can't remember your third question. Cape Wombrau development, we were looking at obviously continuing a whole lot of native planting, as well as building a number of further tracks, some parks furniture, seating, so on and so forth, up around Cape Wombrau and the tracks that are there. Yeah, so that's what that development plan was being looked at. It was a long-term period plan, looking at it in 3-year chunks. So a chunk soon, chunk in 3 years, and then a chunk in another 3 years, trying to aggregate all of the funding together so we make a bit more of an impact when we spend money, rather than having a little bit of money each year. So that's the plan for Cape Wombrau.
Councillor Cowles.
Thanks, Mayor Kuchar. Just wondering, when we have these contracts, like around Alps to Ocean, these guys are coming in and doing the work. What sort of safeguards do we put in our contracts? If we're building and a builder walks off site, or if we're getting earthworks done ourselves, do we have any performance requirements? Do we have any penalties in these contracts if they do? I mean, obviously it's of a reasonable cost to us to have to go back and move that to another contractor, plus also the staff time on top of that. Just wondering if we build any of those protections into these contracts.
Yes, we do. It depends on the nature of the contract, the risk that we perceive in the contract when we're letting it out to tender, as well as the value and complexity of the works. Generally, we'll look at putting things in place like performance bonds or contractors bonds, where we see contracts as being especially risky, where we see the possibility of a contractor walking away from a contract as having a large impact on business, then we will increase the level of those bonds to ensure that we can continue to carry on work at a higher cost without necessarily having to have the ratepayers pay additional for it. I can't comment on the specifics of this particular contract, but we do put things in place to try to de-risk what happens as far as the council coffers when contractors do walk away or fail to perform. We do have a number of performance metrics and standards. Our preference generally is to try to work with a contractor in the first instance to try to improve their performance before we take other actions to remove them from a contract. In this case, the contractor has looked at what they can likely achieve and has decided to walk away from the contract rather than us having to pursue any more onerous methods of removing the contract from them.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to raise an issue in the Parks and Reserve space, but with respect, I don't expect Mr. Rendell will actually be aware of it, but the Palmerston Vintage Machinery, as I understand, have a 99-year lease to operate on our parks in Palmerston. They're currently going to have a crank up weekend this weekend, and the feedback I'm getting back from them is they're finding it very hard in the engagement with council to the point where they feel that we're trying to prevent that from happening rather than actually facilitating it. I understand with health and safety that we do have rules we need, but surely we can get a more user-friendly engagement with people who are creating events that the district's going to prosper from.
Feel free to make a comment.
Thank you for that comment, John. I might pick it up with you. Sorry, Jim. I might pick it up with you later on. Here's some more specifics and see what we can do to facilitate a better outcome. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of questions from me. One's on the park toilet. We've talked about a public process for art design on that, and it would be good to actually have that installed with the design on it rather than have a basically so people see it from as the finished product right from the start. So just ask about that and where we might be on that. And equally with the new proposed toilet for Maraki Boulders area, the ability to actually be a bit more creative there. There's a pretty cool entrance onto the beach there now, and we really could have something that reflects that rather than just be a fairly bland toilet block. So any thoughts on that opportunity?
With respect to Almoa toilets, I don't have an update for you at this point in time with respect to the public process to determine what art may actually go onto those toilets. I can follow that up and report back. With respect to the Moeiraki toilets, yes, we will be working closely with Turunanga or Moeiraki, as well as with the Department of Conservation to design that toilet block as well as the surrounding area. We are aware that it is a site of quite a high cultural significance. So that entire project will be working very, very closely with relevant agencies to ensure that we do something that's appropriate for that space.
Thank you. Any other questions for Parks and Rec? Okay, move on to roading. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Josh, I would like to compliment the work that roading have done with the transport choices at the north end of town. I think councillors, some of us are aware, but some probably aren't, that in the initial dealings with Waka Kotahi, the scope was not where it's ended up. And thankfully, we're now going to have lights and a system that will allow safer access onto State Highway 1. So thank you for that. But a question that I have asked and had a reply, but I'll ask you to maybe answer again, is the Mayor and I attended a management meeting between the contractor and council staff in July, and there were discussions around improvements to the contract by way of staff liaising together and possibly even working out of a shared office. Can you tell me how that's progressed, please?
Just note too, you've got Kushla Tapper, rating manager, online as well. So
I'll answer that one in the first instance. So since that meeting in July, the management team of the contractor met again, and we've discussed a range of different initiatives that we could embark upon to try to improve collaborative working on the roading maintenance contract. One of which was the potential for co-location of the relevant contract teams. Those discussions are continuing. We don't yet have something formal to bring back to council and pursue a decision on. There are a number of ideas that were put forward, whether it's our contractor, Whitestone Contracting Limited, putting in a temporary office block type thing at their yard, sharing services with their existing yard, and ensuring that all of the contract teams are put together there, through to pursuing alternate sites as well. We do see that there's likely to be a lot of gain in having our contract teams working more closely together. Obviously, communication is always good. Having closer levels of communication, those incidental discussions that people have when they share an office together, often leads to more collaborative working. You often overhear some of those conversations that other people are talking about something, you overhear it, and then you go, oh, I had that issue such and such a time, and this is how we overcame it. It's those incidental conversations that occur when you share an office that we don't currently have, that we feel could drive some efficiencies on the contract. Obviously, there's a lot of work to go between now and potentially getting there, but it is something we are looking to pursue. Thank you.
Councillor McCone.
Yeah, Josh, the maintenance contract performance, effectively the less will be achieved to the escalation of cost. Do we have a rough percentage of what that will be on what we had budgeted for as opposed to what we're going to get?
I might see if Kushla can answer that one in the first instance.
Morning, everyone. Sorry, could you repeat the question or clarify? Were you asking with the escalations, how much are we physically going to achieve versus what we initially thought, or have I misheard the question?
No, you've got it on one. Thank you.
We've rejiggled a few of the budgets internally this year to put together a bit of a program. There's some aspects that we're cutting back on within maintenance, but also we're reducing the scope of the rehabs and the reseals outside of the maintenance contract in terms of reducing the renewals so that we could still keep core maintenance activities up to date. Overall rough percentages, I believe that we're expecting up between 15 and 20% less physical work within the budget in terms of escalations compared to 2 years ago. I'm not sure about compared to immediately last financial year yet.
Thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I also want to talk about the maintenance contract, but before that, I'm just curious. Councillor Thompson has basically said there are going to be more lights, and yet if you look at transport choices, there's a reference here to the scope of the program being further refined to now fully include signalised, fully signalised intersections. Then there's going to be some communication with local businesses and residents, and then wider public communication. Well, what's the point of the communication if we've already made up our minds, or Waka Kotahi's already decided to put the lights in? I mean, seriously, can the scope of these things be changed if people say, We just don't want a string of traffic lights or the whole length of State Highway 1 through Oamaru.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hopkins. The Transport Choices program has been further refined. We had to negotiate hard to have the traffic lights actually included in the program. They were removed from the program from the initial concepts. There's 2 signalised intersections that we're looking at Arundel Street / Regina Lane and at Redcastle Road. Yep. From, continuing public consultation and obviously council making a decision on the final designs, we're not being dictated to from Waikakotahi. Okay, we had to fight quite hard to have the potential for those lights included to try to improve some of the safety outcomes and the traffic flow issues that we see in the north end. If council don't want that to occur, we can further refine the designs. The designs will be coming to you on site. We have to tender. We're not being dictated to. We had to fight quite hard to try to have an improved outcome than what we thought.
Well, yeah, look, supplementary that then through you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to see some accident stats and data relating to those intersections along with the refined design, to be perfectly honest, because that's something we haven't seen at all as to date. Now, the maintenance contract one that I said I also was concerned about, you've just said to us that we're going to get 20% less done. I mean, I would have thought it's not 2 sentences, it's a substantial report to council. And it might have been that we would have been invited to say what we felt was worth ranking in terms of reduction. You've said we're cutting back on rehabs and renewals. Well, or the scope of them anyway. I mean, it might have been appropriate to ask us whether we were happy with the way you trimmed the budget 20%. Do you not think that would have been this?
I think you asked a question, so I would ask either Kushla or Josh to answer that. Kushla, thank you.
So we haven't trimmed the budget at all. The budget is what you've set, and this is with escalations and changing requirements, legislative requirements. That is the amount of physical work you can get done, including the tendered prices received for that budget. So we're making it fit within the annual plan status. It's not people like me deciding, oh, no, we're just going to chop.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Haralei.
Yeah, no, thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to go back to the Transport Choices program. Now that it's been further refined to fully include the signalised intersections, we actually agreed and we supported that, I recall, earlier this year. And I knew that there wasn't enough money, but we had asked you to go back, to Waikakotahi and work on it. So it sounds like Councillor Hopkins thinks it's something new, but it's actually not. And it's also a high risk, area, part of town, because there's so many students from all of those schools in the northern area that are travelling there, and families that are dropping off children every morning and also after school. So I'm really supportive, if we were sitting at this, so well done, I just wanted to say. And then also just in terms of the scope and the refined scope, I think I would just trust management just to get on and do what you need to do, and then you can just provide feedback through to us. We are not managers, we're not in the operational space. We're just here to monitor and provide the oversight. So there's just some comments from me.
Yeah, no, and just I guess in support of that, it's not all about crash statistics. It is, we know there's more and more traffic out that particular way. We know people are waiting 5 10 minutes to get onto the highway, and this is an opportunity to actually help the traffic flow and improve particularly our locals' ability to get on and off the highway safely. So, the lights will achieve that better than those other intersections, but they will all add to the safety of particularly our young people, and hopefully achieve its goal of getting more of those young people to walk and bike to school. So it actually takes some traffic off the roads in the first place. So that's the ultimate goal. We need to be mindful of that, that they can get to school and back safely, and with hopefully reduce some of the traffic impact. Go to Councillor Thompson next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to further add to those comments and for Councillor Hopkins' reassurance, 3 members of the roading subcommittee or roading contract subcommittee actually met with staff and were shown proposals on site. So we don't have someone running around willy-nilly designing stuff without talking to us.
Right reply.
No, I don't want to write for, I stand rebuked, and I accept the comments. I just have a view that there might be some people who aren't terribly happy to see a multitude of traffic lights appearing when it could be roundabouts or something like that. But all I really asked was, what, could the scope be reversed? And Joshua said it can. If I may turn to another, but I totally acknowledge the comments made by the Deputy Mayor and yourself and Councillor Thompson. But look, just look at one other totally unrelated matter. And of course, you're right, I meant reduced level of work, not reduced budget. Under speed management, the draft full speed management plan, which considers safe and appropriate speeds for areas within the whole district, not just school zones, is currently in development and will be consulted on as soon as possible. Now, look, in March of this year, the Prime Minister said Labor was pulling back on this global or nationwide reduction in speeds and focusing only on high-risk areas of the state highway. Why are we pursuing this when we're not obliged to? And it's been proved very contentious elsewhere. It's a hot topic in Dunedin right now. Why are we doing this when we don't have to? And when the government itself has said we're changing our policy and emphasis and focus in this area.
So happy to answer that. Whilst the government has said that they were pulling back on blanket speed reductions on state highways, the law change is still in effect in terms of we're required to have a plan. The plan doesn't mean necessarily that we have to go out and apply a whole lot of limitations. We've tackled the schools thing, which is still strongly supported by all governments through the interim, but the interim only applies for 1.5 years, and we're required to do the public consultation, having a full, which covers a 3-year period, which says, here are the principles that we support. Here are the things that we might do. For example, if a new road is built off an existing road that isn't part of an urban area. So we had a new road built in Omarama recently, where technically it has no speed limit applied. So within the speed management plan, it would say, when a new road is formed in this sort of scenario, it would naturally have a default maximum speed limit of 50 or 60 kilometres an hour if it's urban, or open 100 k's if it's rural. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're planning on putting in a whole lot of speed restrictions. We were required to go out for public consultation before the 5th of October. We've put the brakes on that for a couple of reasons. One, we're conscious that elections is likely, it's a very hot topic, as you say. We've watched the neighbours, our neighbour councils and what they're going through, and we want to bring it to full council for discussion at your level before it goes out publicly. So we're in the list for future meetings, and we've applied for an extension. So we're not spending a lot of time or resource on things that we don't think are going to stay, but we are still meeting the legislative requirements.
Thanks, Councillor.
As an
That's a very useful clarification. Thank you very much.
Councillor McCone.
It just under your network asset management, could you just explain what council non-performance measures and narrative, what that means? Please.
I'm just looking on the side screen to see exactly what I've written there. It was under network and asset management, you said.
While you're looking that up, Kushla, I'll go to Councillor Percival and see if he's got a different question that maybe Josh can address.
With all the work that's going on around on the roading, there's a lot of traffic management. And we have been told it can be up to 25% or more of the costs for a project. It seems to me that it's a total overkill. As an example, yesterday I saw a lollipop man on a no exit road where there's only one resident. So, I mean, surely we've got to have some pushback on this, because we have all the increased costs, which we're totally aware of, because we're told every day about fuel, wages, goodness knows what. But if this is killing these projects, it's got to be addressed. And we have to start applying common sense, driver education if necessary. But surely to goodness, you don't need 4,000 cones, 3 lots of traffic lights, 5 lollipop men when they're replacing a road sign. I mean, this is crazy shit, and we've got to stop it. And if we can't push back as WDC, we've got to have a collective of this of the southern council and push back. This is absolute nonsense. And we can absorb the cost of fuel, etc., if we got rid of the traffic management to the degree it's at. So I think we have to have a review. We have to have a report on that and why they're so complicated and detailed. It's crazy. Water people are the same. Any of our infrastructure jobs, parks, it's absolutely ludicrous. So we've got to push back, and it's got to start now.
So I'll address that to the level I can. There is pushback happening. You know, I think we've watched quite gobsmacked as the standards for very busy highways and roads transplanted onto our rural roads and right across rural and provincial New Zealand. There is pushback happening. And I think there is some action, but I'm not too sure what exactly it is. But Kushla, are you able to comment on that one?
Yes, and thank you. So there is definitely localised pushback in terms of us more rural councils saying, you know, this is not the right sized approach. And we've started discussions with our regional neighbours. However, the more metro based ones are quite in support of it, and so we don't see much alignment there in terms of the likes of our DCC neighbour. They're dealing with things at a very, very different level to us. So my perspective on it is, when we had Copton come in, it was built for the state highways, and then the local roads supplement was developed for smaller, less risk sites. However, in the last couple of years, where people have been hurt and killed while working on the road, sadly, a lot of those have actually been on rural roads, and they would have been defined as potentially low risk, but it's the behaviour of the people driving through that's put them at risk. And so now that it's been changed to be more of a health and safety at work type scenario, it's not just us as the PCBU that is in charge of it, but also the contractors that are putting their own staff out there are required to provide this duty of care. And at the moment, we're in that development stage where everyone's quite scared of, well, who doesn't want to be the first one to get hauled up in front of the courts and see what the consequences are. It's hard to, it's very, very easy to say, yeah, it seems ridiculous, we need to reduce and do less, but no one wants to be that person who has to go and explain to that person's family why we as a governance body decided that we weren't going to follow best practice. We were going to allow less protection and control for the people working on that site, and that person hasn't come home today.
Okay,
so
thank you.
It's complex.
Definitely an ongoing discussion. Do you have a response to that earlier question, Kushla?
Yes, I think I missed a word there. I believe that was supposed to be that they were non-financially, sorry, it's just disappeared. The non-financial measures, so as in not necessarily the dollars performance, but the other performance measures such as roughness and things like that. So it's an annual report that's required in Wakatahi's system.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick question for myself. When I went through this agenda, there was the item on the Kakanui Bridge renewal, and I noted there was going to be a informative community meeting, and I made a note that we include the governance team with that. Found out late yesterday that meeting was last night. It was too late for me to make alternative arrangements to go to it, but it is something that's really important. It's one of the biggest projects, roading projects that we carry out, and I think more of us would have liked to have gone. And if you're looking at it, the elected representatives for the ward, don't forget that there's more than councillors that are elected by the ward. So it would be good to get a report. I don't need it now, but it'd be good for us to have a report on how that meeting went and get an understanding of what the response was from the community to the various options around the renewal of the Kakanui Bridge. That was all I had. Any other questions on roading? Okay, well, thank you very much, Kushla. Appreciate your responses, and we'll now move on to water. And just acknowledge we've got Marty Pacey in the chamber for that. So, councillors, any questions? Councillor Thompson.
Not specifically from the report, Mr. Pacey, but I've been involved in some consultation from your department in the last couple of weeks, which was very good, and I would compliment staff for their participation. But I would actually echo the remarks made by the Mayor in terms of knowing what's going on. I think we need to up our game in terms of how we engage, because when we're dealing with issues that are important to the ratepayers, generally the elected members are the ones who cop it first in the neck. And if we don't know or are not informed that these meetings are on, we haven't got a very defensible position.
Okay. Any response?
Thank you for the comment. It's certainly something that we're upping our game on. One of the vacancies we have in our team is an engagement officer. It's currently part of a role, so we will do more and more of it, and we will keep you informed as best we can. That's certainly noted. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Marty, just the backflow installation contract. I'm trying to remember, this isn't the conversation, or does this impinge upon the conversation we had about who pays for work to be done off property? My recollection is we do have a budget for this, but are we footing the whole bill, or is some of it being paid by the businesses that you identify here?
Great question. It's something we've been talking about in the office just in the last few days. At present, it's undecided. So it's currently loan funded, debt funded, will transfer to the entity. The entity will decide how to repay the loan. It's likely to go on the businesses long term, but certainly not in the short term.
Well, supplementary to that then, so if it were to be loan funded, would that be recouped by a modification of the cubic metre charge or a targeted rate or something of that sort? I mean, obviously we can't, well, you're saying that the entity will resolve that, assuming there's going to be an entity. If it's left to us, obviously it comes back to us, yes?
Yeah, good question again. But it could be via a combination of all of those options. And it may also be that the greater public good also pays a portion of the backflow prevention, because we are protecting the wider public from the risk. So it's yet to be decided.
Councillor McCone.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. So the emergency management planning session, I presume that is our current contractor, South Roads, as far as that's concerned. I suppose I'm getting to, why don't we not involve Whitestone Roading and Specialised Services that are actually installing a lot of this stuff right now, so that if something does go wrong, they're also in the frame. And my other question was the water leak detection program in several community networks. Could you just expand on that a wee bit, please?
Okay, so the emergency planning session came out of the water safety plans, primarily targeted at if, in all honesty, if I and another couple of key staff weren't around, how would the rest of the team respond to like a major disruption, like our main 600 diameter pipe coming into Oamaru failed? What would they do? Would they throw their hands up in the air and go, ah? Or, so what we're trying to do is set some guides around how we will respond to those sorts of emergencies, rather than in the past when we had a small team, it would be more of an ad hoc approach. So that's the emergency side of it. It's not from a planned renewals perspective per se. And the other question was around
the water leak detection program, and just expand on the community networks and what's being done there.
Yeah, so that's mainly Oamaru, a little bit in Palmerston. So that's ensuring that we're being efficient with our water supply and getting on top of leaks. Partially demand management, but partially to ensure that we comply with our resource consents, because we've got to show that we're doing leak detection through our networks. And it's mainly in those two urban networks, a little bit in Kura and a little bit in Omarama. Just some known areas of high leakage or high losses.
And just also had a question myself on the emergency management planning sessions, and it is about more civil defence emergencies that we might have, and in particular the big one, AF8 type scenario with the Alpine fault going. We've been told we could be facing 3 months without power, and that's obviously got major repercussions on, or implications for our water supply and also wastewater. Has the team modelled those sorts of scenarios to say how would they actually deal with such outages?
Yep, good question. Thanks, Mayor Kircher. Some of the main suppliers like Oamaru have generators as backup, like Oamaru Water Supply, for example, from power. We've got projects in our current plan and LTP going forward to add some extra generators, the mobile generators, to move around the place. We've also got resilience in storage at our water treatment plant in Oamaru, and also building and storage at the South Hill Reservoir contract as well, so that we will have drinking water. It won't necessarily be piped, maybe tankered or fill up points, that sort of scenario. Some of the more rural areas, not so much. People would likely have to travel to collect water. It's certainly in the forefront of my mind whenever I'm having these discussions with my staff, or these sessions, is around AF8. Will likely be a staging area for the AF8 to service inland areas like Central and Queenstown, and because we would be less effective, we would have obviously got an airport, which is extremely helpful. Whether we've got a bridge or not, who knows? There's been an awful lot of thinking by me and the team, safe to say. I hope I retire before it happens.
Yeah. I think it's probably a hope of a lot of us. I guess, it's looking at the North Island situation, what happened last year, and it's carried on into this year and so on. And looking at the challenges of even just getting fuel to those generators and so on. So I think, good that you're doing some thinking on that. So thank you. Councillor Percival.
Yeah, Marty, I was just wondering, it's just a question for a matter of interest, but with a new plant in Marama, I know it's all controlled in that, but does it put any pressure on the older infrastructure throughout the township?
Good question. It still supplies water to the same reservoirs. So it doesn't alter anything within the township itself. And it's built to withstand an AF8 earthquake.
The only thing left standing. Councillor Cowles.
Thank you. Just on the Marama one as well, I noticed that we had a visit there with Community Board last week, and it seems a very similar design to what we have in Otamatata. I noticed that, you know, we had a few issues that when flooding comes through, we had turbidity and those sorts of things. Is that being checked with flooding? Sort of seems very close to the river, and we know that it's prone to flooding here. Do we know if we have floods that we're not going to have those similar issues?
Good question. From a quality perspective, we may still have some turbidity issues and discoloured water. Certainly from a whether it's physically out of the flooding area, I am assured that it is. That's why we purchased the piece of land where we did. It's the piece of land certainly wasn't impacted by the recent flooding that we had in the Marama. Yeah, so the site's a good site, out of the way, should be fine. I understand that we will be installing filters in front of the UV filtration, your UV disinfection.
Thank you. Councillor Flaxman.
Thank you. Marty, I was just wondering if you could expand on under the risks and opportunities, the comment around three waters, now affordable waters, what the range of possible scenarios might look like depending on the outcome of the election.
And you have one minute.
Yeah, who knows? There will be some sort of reform, I expect. Whether it's exactly as it is or whether it's by collaboration, I'm not sure. I'll tell you in a month or two. I honestly don't know. I believe there'll be some reforming going on, and I believe our work program will probably need to be refined and cut back, just through the uncertainty of who's going to pay for it. That's my comments.
Thank you. We'll draw that one to a close. We're halfway through our time and 1/9 of the way through our report. So we shall see. But obviously, as I said, you spend the group spends about 3/4 of our budget, so maybe that's proportional. Thank you very much to the assets team. Appreciate you giving the responses here this morning. And we move on to people and transformation and the IS group update. And Chloe here, so not sure if you want to say anything or else we can go straight to questions.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. So we have Jenny and Scott here for the library and IS, and I think we also have Francis online. Apologies from Pam. Aside from what's in the report, which will take us read and go to questions, I just wanted to highlight the grant from the Ministry of Culture and Heritage that we received the news of on Friday. We didn't quite get that in time to make it into the report, but obviously that is a significant update to the work on the cultural facilities project. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And I was going to draw some attention to that and just thank you for being bold and aspirational, for doing your homework and knowing that you could put a large application in that might be considered and it was accepted in full. So it's been a giant leap forward for the Forrester Gallery and for our district. So thank you very much for that. Going straight to questions on the library. No. Councillor Hopkins.
Well, I didn't have any questions on the library or the Opera House. A lot of very useful and helpful information, and thank you for it. 2 questions on the gallery. On bottom of page 20, you're talking about an upcoming shared program, which includes participation in the Waitaki Arts Festival with a moa trail developed alongside the geopark. If you could tell us a bit more about that. equally, I asked Chloe, are you concerned about the gallery visitors? The numbers are not increasing. Indeed, they look as though they're decreasing relative even to last year. So what, if anything, is this a concern? And if it is, what, if anything, is being done to actually reverse that downward trend in numbers?
Thank you. Firstly, on the question on the mower trail, that's being led by our educator Liz King along with Sasha Morris from the Geopark, and it's looking at the number of places around the Waitaki where we have public artworks that are celebrating moa. There's a number of different sculptures and murals around the place. So it's encouraging people to get out and see those, especially children. I think it has some questions around moa and learning about them. In terms of the gallery visitor numbers, no, I'm not overly concerned with them. Every year's programming is different. We have to experiment with what we're programming and to see what attracts an audience. And it's not purely about numbers. It's also about serving different aspects of the community. And over a number of years, we try and balance out that exhibition program. And we may have things that, are exceptionally popular and get large numbers of people through. And then we may have things that have a smaller audience, but are something that, really fits with our strategic outcomes and who we think it's important that we're serving. And the numbers for September and October should look incredibly good with the funding that we've had from the Lion Foundation to bring 2,000 school students and preschoolers through the gallery in the next, well, they're already partway through it into September and through into October as well. So we continue to look at that. Obviously, I want as many people to enjoy the gallery facilities as possible, but the numbers are what they are there, and we will keep a close eye on them.
Okay, just to bring a wee bit of order, we will work through the different departments so that we can, we're not jumping all over the place and going to and froing with managers. So is there any questions on customer liaison? Go to libraries. Councillor Ryan, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, well, actually just thank you for the work that you're doing. And it's really great to see the different events and programs and how they align with council's strategic goals. I was interested in the stats around people coming through the doors and use. Is there anything that, because it's a great increase, is there anything that you're attributing that to? And do you get stats also on e-users, like in terms of the people using using Waitaki through the Borrow Box app and that sort of thing?
Through excuse me, through the chair, thanks for your question, Councillor Ryan. To answer your question about numbers of people through the doors, we've seen this rapidly increasing over the last couple of months, and I think it's due to several factors. One is people are now feeling a lot more comfortable to come into the libraries sort of post-COVID. So there's that feeling in the community that people are feeling a lot better about being in bigger groups. Secondly, we're running a huge program of events around wellbeing and also the Love Your Libraries month that we're currently engaged in. So people are realising what the library can do as far as their overall wellbeing. Your second question around numbers for electronic collections. Yes, we do gather numbers for electronic collections, and what's been interesting is that often there's a balance between electronic collections and visitors to the library. So if initially we saw post-COVID, we saw a high sort of uptake of people using our online collections, lower numbers of people coming into the library, and we're gradually seeing that kind of do a wee bit of reverse, and we're waiting for that to balance out. So great question.
Thank you. Anything else in libraries? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not so much a question, but a pat on the back. I'd like to commend staff because I'm reading in library about memory care for people with dementia. At the gallery, people with Alzheimer's, and I think it's absolutely brilliant that we're engaging with some sectors of the community that are challenged. And on a lighter note, I think it will probably assist you in dealing with the governance team going forward.
Through the chair, thanks for your comments.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, anything else for the libraries? Move on to the Oamaru Opera House, and note we got Francis McElhinney online, so welcome Francis. So Councillor McCone.
Yeah, look, I just have a question about the show banners and digital signage and whether how far down the track that is and whether how serious it is. Bearing in mind that the Oamaru Club already has one on 7th Street and that digital signage can be very expensive to maintain in the long term.
Welcome, Francis.
Hello, well, thank you. Through the chair, yes, we're just exploring that. The original supplier who IT were chasing up, that was Scott. They've now gone out of, they're no longer running digital signage. So we're still very much in the just planning exploration phase, if you like.
Thank you. Anything else on the Opera House? Okay, no. Short and sweet. Thank you very much, Francis. Moving to the Forester Gallery, and obviously we've got Chloe here. So any further comments on the gallery? No. Okay. Moving to, where are we next? The museum. Also Chloe. No questions?
Does that include the archive?
Yeah, let's include the archive as well.
Well, look, I do have one. Thank you, Mayor Ketcher. I'm just curious to know, it's really interesting to see how many people are back using the archive. On the bottom of page 23, there's a reference to the Oamaru branch of the New Zealand Society of Genealogists making use of the refurbished spaces for meetings and classes. Do we have any sort of charging regime for people using those facilities? Because I know some of the genealogical people do offer have a fee for service. So I'm just wondering if we have any charges relating to the use of the facilities.
Through the chair, we have our usual charges which are agreed through the annual plan process. In terms of the genealogist use of the spaces, we've got a long-standing informal partnership with them, and it's something actually I'll probably be talking about a wee bit this afternoon when we're talking about transformation, is how we work better with the genealogists. We receive a lot of work from them. A huge number of our archive volunteers come from that genealogy group. So at this stage, for the use of the space, we have not put a charge. We do have people increasingly wanting to make use of that space in the museum. So when we come through the next planning phase, I will be looking at what charges we think might be appropriate for the use of the space. Though I think for the genealogy group, I would certainly be suggesting that given the wonderful support they show us, that might be a way we acknowledge that work.
Thanks, Chloe.
Thank you, and just acknowledge I guess the interest that's garnered out in the community with the some of the social media posts of old photos and so forth. It's certainly hit a spot of people being able to look back and reminisce and so forth. So yeah, it's very good. Anything else on museum and archive? Okay, we'll move to information technology and information management. Scott. Over to you.
Through the chair, I'll take the report as read. Any questions?
Okay, any questions? Councillor McCone and Councillor Holding.
Yeah, I'm technology challenged as far as that's concerned, but right down the bottom you've got ADAPT, which is Property Asset Management System. Could you just expand on that and what its use is going to be and what it does, please?
So it's currently in use in the property department for managing those buildings and the properties that they've got renters and those community buildings for asset management inside of those. So all the replacements and maintenance works and things that happens inside of those. It's replacing an older system that's been around for a number of years and was due for replacement.
So I suppose you're saying it's an electronic ledger. Is that what you're saying?
Sorry.
It's an electronic ledger ready to each building. Is that what it
Does work orders and all sorts of all the maintenance tasks in between. So it arranges all the financials and that, and when replacements are due in rents and all of those, the nitty-gritty details of managing properties.
Councillor Holding, and then Councillor Blackler and Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just wondering on the information management and the Goima request, it's sort of indicating that it's taken up quite a bit of staff time and work to process them all, and there's an increase on them. Are we looking at something to build in a treatment for it, maybe in our comms, so we can front foot it rather than just to buck the trend?
Through the chair. So we're updating the process and the systems that we use to manage those. So those include better communication to the public, as well as how we handle internal communications with staff and how we manage that time, just to get better visibility and better tracking and be more transparent in the process as well. It also include more transparent charges and estimation around the times that will take to process those. So we actually make it a lot clearer for everyone involved in that process.
Thank you, Councillor Blackley.
Thank you. I just had a question around the district plan review and the mapping tool interface that both ourselves as governance and the community are able to use. It's very clunky and quite hard to kind of navigate your way around. Is there, other than a browser-based interface, is there another way of accessing that tool, or is that just the nature of how it is?
Through the chair. That tool is pretty commonly used across councils in New Zealand now. So it was trying to standardise that process around how that's used and seen throughout the councils. There was still work being done. It's not finalised yet with what it will look like. But there would be a paper version. As for electronic, I don't think there is another solution for that at the moment.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, not just going back briefly to information management. If I seem to remember that at one stage, maybe 1 term, 2 terms ago, we got updates quarterly, perhaps, as to what the requests were or who they were from. These are the Goima requests, and I know we've now got 52 this year. So it's a big increase, as you say, 86%. Is it something that's worth ventilating publicly by just telling us, so the whole of the community can see what they're about and who's demanding them or who's seeking them?
Through the chair, we do have an online proactive release where a lot of them do end up. So those are all on the website. The ELT also get a report every time they have one of their meetings around what the current ones are, but it will be up to ELT whether or not we publish that within these as well.
Mr. Cook.
Yes, through the chair, the ELT member is asked to approve the response to the Goima, and in that process, the ELT member decides whether the information is proactively released, and then that's put up on the website. So they are available for the public and elected members to see. And if you believe there would be value in having a separate report presented to council, then we could probably include it in the activity update report.
Thank you. Anything else? Deputy Mayor Bailey. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. I really like your graduate program as well. Was there much interest generated from it?
Through the chair. So the main creator of that has been Isabel, who's away today. So I can't take credit for that. But we have had I think 17 or 18 applicants so far, which is quite good compared to other roles I've had advertised.
Very good. Anything else? Yes. Councillor Hopkins.
Just a very quick question regarding the graduates. You say that recruitment went live in August, on the 10th of August. So we expect the selected graduate to start in November this year. So we've chosen somebody. Is that correct?
Through the chair. At the moment, it's still in the open stage. So let's look to, off the top of my head, finalise this week, which we'll be doing shortlisting later on this week.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. We'll now move on to the Heritage Environment and Regulatory Group updates, and we've got a bunch of statistics here of or data around some of the activity and so forth. So do we have any questions on any of those tables, first of all? Councillor Hopkins.
I have, question comment on page 34, the district plan update. The key risk at the bottom says progress of the district plan review subcommittee reviewing feedback is running behind schedule and could impact the program timeline. Well, I think it's imperative we don't let that happen. So if we have to have some more meetings of the subcommittee to review feedback, then let's do it. Let's just schedule them. I mean, it's not, put bluntly, it's not rocket science. We can say, yes, we'll come in a couple of extra days and do some heavy lifting.
So there's been some good discussions between Mr. Cook and Mr. Campbell and the chair of the subcommittee and myself. And basically looking at how we get through that process so that we can have a recommendation from the subcommittee to council on the 19th of December to adopt the proposed plan. So which then gives, I said tongue in cheek, the planning team the whole January to actually get it tidied up and out, but that might take a little bit longer than that. But yeah, the idea is to absolutely dedicate the time that the subcommittee needs to go through and work their way through the chapters, and that there's a few left still to be done, and then there's going through all of the ones we have done and getting resolutions out of each of those, so that it's a more bite-sized approach than here's the 40 whatever chapters. What do you think? Kind of approach. I'll hand over to Mr. Campbell to respond a bit further on that, because he's the one who's had to do the hard thinking on it.
Thank you, Worship. The risk is identified there as kind of a potential one, and we did have some good progress in July and August on that. So we are feeling that we are fairly up to date in terms of going through the feedback. We've also used the Convene platform to upload feedback in chapters that had not a lot of sort of issues come up, and there'll be another tranche of that coming through shortly. So it gives you a chance to go through and just read it at your own leisure. They're fairly minor things that probably don't need to go through a workshop to work through. And we have workshop on the 3rd of October and also mid-November to kind of tidy up a few loose ends. And then, as the Mayor said, we'll look at programming, I guess, a series of district plan subcommittee meetings to actually work through approvals prior to or recommendations to council to approve prior to council approving the full proposed plan for notifying early next year. So it's just a matter of staging that, bearing in mind the 2 more workshops to come that just give you a chance to look at the feedback as well as what's uploaded and convened. So please do go through those and let us know if there's any issues. And yeah, we'll be working to that sort of December deadline to get everything in front of you for that first stage recommendation for council to approve. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else on that particular topic? Okay, other topics, Councillor McCone.
Yeah, under activity 7, resource consent monitoring. I'm just wondering how many of those consents were actually for burning and how many were actually granted in that time frame.
Mr. Campbell, any idea, or Mr. Cook?
I'm not sure the monitoring is such, but I know we've at least issued 2 burning consents recently. I don't know if it's quite captured in that quarter, but they're fairly recent anyway. So that they probably, to be fair, they probably haven't been monitored if they've only just been issued. But there may be monitoring on previous consent in that period.
Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Yeah, I apologise, I don't have the split of that monitoring, but I could get that and send that round to linked members separately.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Blackley.
I'll withdraw my finger because Councillor McCone beat me to the same question.
It's a burning issue. Councillor Blackley.
Oh, my question was around burning as well. I just wondered how many consents have been in the system that will now need to roll over into next season based on the fire restrictions that are coming into place.
Sure. I'm aware that we have 2 consents waiting on information or written approvals, so they're yet to be approved, and I said, there's been a handful approved recently, so they might have got in time before the restrictions.
Sorry, supplementary. So those consents have come in freshly this year, or have they hung over from previous years?
Yeah, so as they work through issues, depending on what they are, who they need to get approval from, it can take a while. So I'm aware one's probably lodged late last year. The others are more recent. So there's a bit of a mix depending on.
What are the key things, the challenges for people trying to get these consents over the line, and is it, are there any kind of inconsistencies in how other external stakeholders are being engaged?
So the challenges relate to understanding the biodiversity on the site. So they need to, they've got information on that, how they work through those constraints, and also if there's affected neighbours, like if it's next to dock land, that type of thing. So we can't dictate how dock respond, but we can try and help facilitate those interactions.
So do dock respond in a different manner based on whether the land is leasehold or freehold?
They look at the values, and depending on what approval they're being asked for, they'll give advice based on that. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, moving on, if you'll allow, to the section on legislation, strategies, policies, bylaws and projects. Perhaps it's a question for us or for Mr. Palmley. I'm looking at the bottom of page 36, mandated curbside collection services, which are going to impact us and are going to impose costs. I'm wondering if we have considered or are willing to consider taking a public position, just saying we'd like to do this our way and we don't want an imposed solution. To date, we've been silent, and I don't think we should be. I think we should say, stop pushing us around. Let us solve the problem our way, in the most affordable way for our people. So I'm just asking, really, have we considered making and adopting a public position on the matter, which we haven't today?
I think that'd be a matter for the council. We are here to advise you, but if you want to take a public position on it, I think rather than doing that in an activity update report, we need to have a discussion on, you know, what this means for us and what alternative positions there might be. But I'd also suggest that doing that as one council wouldn't necessarily be very effective. We need to look at how we work together as a sector, and if there's an appetite to looking at different ways of doing it within the sector, and engaging with whoever is the next government on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cook.
Just in reply to that, I think we have illustrated to you at various briefings the time pressure that we are under to achieve this, whatever this turns out to be. We need to start that work. Officers need to work on that, and as the CEO has said, it would be a council's view. I can't allocate officer time to do that, given the size of this project and the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, no.
Thank you, Councillor McCain.
Look, I'd just make the comment and reinforce what Jim's alluding to, and understand time pressures, but there's always going to be time pressures. And I think somewhere along the line, we should actually look at it quite seriously. Don't have to implement it, but just look at different options. And from my own personal point of view, we actually need to start leading the show rather than following what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, I don't think we made a submission on this particular legislation. I can't recall, maybe through the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, but we did take a position on that. Mr. Cook.
Just to clarify, we will be bringing options around curbside collection to you in form of briefing for you to look at in the not too distant future. I'm not sure of the date that's scheduled, but there will be options. But we do have to bear in mind that we are, I think, one of 5 out of 67 councils that have no council controlled curbside collection service. So our arguments would have to be pretty strong to convince government for us to do something separate to the flow.
Okay. We need to move on from that. So I'll go to, is there anything else in this particular section? Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll now move on to the Finance and Corporate Development Group update. Yep.
Just one more, sorry. Have we got an elected member working on the CCWG group?
Nearly.
Nearly.
To be appointed, approved by council. So for discussion this afternoon, it's briefing. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Right, moving on to Finance Corporate Development Group updates. Finance, pretty important. Right, any questions on it? Everyone's happy? Double check I'm not anything in there. Councillor McCone? Was that you with your hand up? No, okay. Thinking. Amanda, would you like to make any comments?
I just have a bit of an update on the annual report status. Officers have been working with the auditors behind the scenes, and we heard yesterday they're in the process of securing an audit team, but the audit is likely to start in early October. It was supposed to start yesterday. So that's putting our legislative deadline in a bit of jeopardy. So we're still communicating with the auditors. Hopefully we can get them here start of October, but it may be an early November sign off. So we'll reach the legislative deadline of 31 October. We're also still negotiating with the fee. Last time we brought it to council, we agreed to propose a fee of 213,000 because the auditors had suggested an increase to 274k. They have come back with another proposal of 230. So we're just working on that before we can start the audit. And the other updates, I'll just take it as read, but we're continuing to work on the annual report and be ready for the auditors at the start of October. And obviously long-term plan, you're up to speed with what's happening there, starting consultation, pre-engagement next month.
Thank you very much. So, councillors, nothing else on there? Okay, all right, you get off pretty easily. So thank you. Moving to community development, and welcome Helen Algar and Jason Everett to the chamber for that. So any comments that you want to make, Helen? Okay, straight into it. Any questions, councillors? Councillor McCone. More than thinking this time.
Yes. It just on the community development housing activity update. Do we need to do that in the respect that the tenancy tribunal, all those guys have all that information, they're out there doing it anyway? Are we not just doubling up on some of that stuff?
Through the chair, I would say no, we won't be doubling up on anything. Dr. Stewart's doing a really good job keeping au fait with all the current activity and legislation. So I think in actual fact, what it's going to do is put us ahead of the game and be able to be responsive as a community, not just as council.
Deputy Mayor Lately, please.
Yeah, no, thank you. And also thank you to the team, for being able to put these together, because I know there are parts of our community that don't have access to the actual information, even though it's there, it's not presented to them, it's out of date, it's not communicated in a way that makes sense to them. So I think anything like, like onboarding and education and awareness is always helpful, for parts of our community. So thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Helen, I wonder if you could just give us a bit more information on that last sentence on the housing. update, we are also investigating opportunities for housing related research with the School of Geography at the University of Otago to facilitate evidence-informed decision-making in the housing area. All seems a bit enigmatic and cryptic.
We are fortunate to have Dr. Stewart's relationships with the university. So she is just looking at any advantage that may give us or opportunity that may give us for research in the future. You'll be aware that we have undertaken our own housing research in the past. So any opportunities I think that we can get to increase our knowledge of our community and what the situation is in regard to housing in our community, I think the better. And it's an amazing opportunity for council to build on the relationship with the University of Otago, not just for housing, but for other research opportunities that come forward as well. So we're very grateful to Dr. Stewart and to Ash for pursuing that relationship.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on community development? Thank you very much to you both. Appreciate you being here. Right, moving on to health and safety, and you're in the hot seat today. Okay, so we've got Amelia Lyons who's wearing that hat today. So welcome to the chamber, Amelia. Any questions on health and safety? Councillor Hopkins.
Look, I just had one. Under that health and safety bullet point 2, worker engagement and participation audits planned for the roading and water services teams have been deferred to the next quarter to commence in October. I'm just curious to know why.
I couldn't tell you why, but I will refer to the health and safety advisor and come back to you on that one.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, Bill. Not well.
Bill's got the day booked off. Okay, I don't know what to do, but hopefully something fun.
Yeah, it's part of the work-life balance thing going on. Health and safety in action. Okay, any other questions? Any really tricky ones for Amelia? Okay, nothing. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Now moving on to economic development update, and just acknowledge we've got Mel Jones and Sonia also in the council chamber. Right, any questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, I have two. Land and water, can you tell us a bit more about this land use optimization workshop? You've got a core group of representative farmers and businesses, but it'd be interesting to, if you can amplify, enhance the information on that. And underneath that, the business innovation and growth, you're talking about the event that took place on the 22nd of June that attracted over 70 individuals. And you go on to say one attendee was subsequently co-funded to attend a production validation workshop with Callaghan and Innovation. Who was that? Are we allowed to ask?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you. Yes, that was Top Flight.
Oh.
So we publicised it on our LinkedIn Inspire Waitaki page, and they were one of the people who put their hand up. So it was a $300 investment, so it wasn't a big investment, but it was really helpful for them to be able to work through a product proposition and think about how they take it to market. And obviously they've already been successful, so this is just looking at another string to their bow. In terms of the land use workshop, yes, we've got a workshop tomorrow with 9 farmers and organisations that's being supported by Lincoln University. The Agribusiness and Economics Research Unit is going to be presenting a lot of data. And really the aim of the workshop is to say, well, what do we know about how the climate is impacting on our district and what new opportunities might be emerging. It's then talking to the farmers in the room who are a cross-section of beef and sheep, dairy, horticulture. We've got, for example, we've got Marie Organics is also coming too. So we're looking across the spectrum to hear what their thoughts are. And then out of that workshop, we'll then say, okay, what are the questions we still need to understand more about? What else do we want to discover? That will go into the next phase. And then we're looking to have a broader workshop with a broader cohort of people from across the district to then really look at how we drill down to what might we then do. So it's quite exciting, and people are really, really energised and keen to participate.
Thank you.
Right, working our way through. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. I just want to say the new Neat Places video is brilliant. And David's voice in particular is great. What was council's involvement or contribution to that? If any?
We've for the Neat Places campaign, Tourism Waitaki funded the second printing, the reprinting. Council has paid for the video. And we have been fundamental in asking David to do the Mickey at the beginning, and it does work really well actually. And I think that the nice thing now with that video, it also talks about the Waitaki Whitestone Geopark. So we're kind of pulling all our horses together, so we've got a stronger package. So yeah, thank you. And we'll be supporting businesses to get that up onto their website, as a number of them did that with the first campaign, and then actively promote it on their social media channels. And it's good that we've got a number of new businesses involved in that in the second video too.
Councillor McCone and then Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, so under your district identity and Waitaki story, is that for current, or is that going back on the history? And where I'm coming from with that, we have a couple of very good oral historians in the district, and we have, and I don't suppose you mind me using his name, but you have somebody like Burns Pollock, who is an identity and knows a heck of a lot over how the district's transitioned from the 60s through to now. And perhaps we should be using part of that, or at least getting part of that system into our identity, so we have a trail of history through the area.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, actually. Thank you, Councillor McCone. And probably as well, Sonia might like to talk to that now, actually. But this is going to be part of a broader community engagement approach. And we will be taking the learnings from that broader community engagement approach and then putting that into a proper framework around how are we actually going to structure of the storytelling. Key output from the Waitaki story is indeed bringing the district's identity to life. There was already a lot of work done in this space a few years ago when we were doing the destination management work. Councillor McCone, was he here today? Oh yes, Carol, sorry. You were at one of those groups that we ran up in Otamatata, and there were a lot of stories, and that was distilled into a whole framework. So we're looking to build on that work so that we're not starting from scratch, because you're so right. There is so much knowledge and experience in this district, and it's an opportunity to bring it together. Do you want to?
I think you said it all there, Mel. But we will be getting out and talking to the community in the final 2 weeks of October, hopefully. So we'll watch this space, and we'll be promoting those community conversations and gathering those sorts of feedback and things that we don't know about, including those community connections and the people who hold all that knowledge, and hopefully be able to get them to come along and tell their stories too.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins, you next.
Yeah, yes, a couple of questions on 49 and 50. The reference on page 49 to the Otamatata Master Plan, which has been supported by funding from the Department of Internal Affairs, then goes on to say additional funding has been requested from the Better Off funds to support additional landscaping and cycleway connection. I thought we had approved a budget or allocated a quantum. I mean, is this going to mean that somebody else will get less if the additional funding is provided? So, and the other question is with regard to, on the next page, to the the Geopark Discovery Hub. It's the TIF fund has been reduced by 30 million in the government's recent public service cost savings announcements. So there's only 10 million now contestable by Stream 2 applicants. I guess, do we have a plan B in terms of funding for that tourism discovery or the Geopark Discovery Hub? So it doesn't look as though we're going to get much of that 10 million.
The Geopark are obviously working, I'll answer the second question first. They are working through a process. The consultants are in at the moment. They've already had a walk round and looked at various locations. They're going to come back and do some more engagement with community members. And then they'll be putting their proposal forward. That's all happening by December. So at that stage, we'll then have a look at how strong do we think the application is, and then we can start to have the conversation around what are the other opportunities. The good thing with the work that's been done so far is that we're trying to keep the net quite wide and look at alternative locations for where might be appropriate for a discovery hub. And so I think there's a good bit of thinking, and that can then inform future discussions, which may then have implication on the long-term plan and initiatives that go into the long-term plan. Because obviously, as the Discovery Centre, it's more than just a visitor information centre. It's around educating and having assets that the community can regularly participate in. In terms of the Otamatata Master Plan, 2 points I'll just make on that. The local community have done an amazing job, and we're keen, having talked to them more around pulling that best practice, if you like, together, because their approach and the way that they've actually worked together to unlock funds that aren't council funds that have come from government is really encouraging. And they've driven that project through. They're at the stage now where they don't have quite enough to finish it, and they're looking for support from the Better Off funds to do that, and specifically around some landscaping and cycleway work that'll join things up. So we've said intuitively that feels like an appropriate use of not a huge pot of money, in fairness, and so that will go to the community board to be signed off, and then it obviously has to come back to council for total sign off. Is that fair, Councillor Carls?
Yeah, look, we've been having a bit of a discussion around it. So the ORAI has been working through, the CLDP, which is the Department of Internal Affairs. They had a plan. The plan was in line, and it is in what is in our master plan, so it's aligned with that. And I've been having discussions with staff about that last part that it didn't cover. It's within that master plan, and that's what the Better Off funding, was to be aligned with. It does sit well within that. The plans haven't really changed at all, and we're just finding out how we can get that last lot of funding through so that entire project can be completed. And hopefully while the contractors are still on site at the moment doing that work.
So essentially $225,000 was allocated by us to Otamatata.
No. That's probably sorry, Councillor, Mr. Mayor.
was allocated for benefit of Otamatata, and so that's the money. It's not taking it from someone else. It's actually it might be slightly different to what was envisaged perhaps, but if it's in keeping with the purpose of the fund, I think that's what the community board are looking at, and that's what we'll be looking at.
Yeah, can I just add to that? I mean, there's a lot of work going on with communities in terms of what their plans are, and trying to look at how we best use that Better Off funding and what other funding that there is already in place or that they could tap into. And we propose that we bring that back to members at some point when we're ready to just have an overview of that. And there may be some changes in there which we'd need to agree with the DIA, but we're trying to work through with the communities what it is that we can do to make best use of not just the Better Off funding, but the other fundings that are available out there.
I think this is a good example of transformation of making sure that we are delivering to the community and listening to the community about what they want to actually do, and we've had the same discussions with Palmerston and looking at how we benefit them in a way that I think fits with what we want to achieve, but also very much around what the community wants to achieve. So it's part and parcel. So we'll go to Councillor Thompson and then Councillor McCone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I constantly hear my colleague, Councillor Hopkins, advocate for us to tell central government where to naff off when they're telling us what to do. I wonder whether the community boards feel the same when we're imposing upon them. The Wahimo Community Board clearly stated that the best way to revitalise the main street was with a bulldozer, and they'd prefer to have the track instigated up Puketapu. And now they are left whistling, well, we discuss not only whether they get the money, but how much they get. And I'm sure all of you who accompanied us on the Wahimo ward tour, seen what happens, how far the funding can go if you empower local people to get on with the job.
Councillor McCain.
Good question.
Yeah, could you please expand on the Oamaru and North End placemaking projects, or what that involves, or what's going on there?
In fairness, there isn't a lot going on at the moment. Cindy was away for a month and she's only just come back. So we're at the stage now where we're just trying to scope and get our heads around what the opportunity might be with this very small budget. And to Mr. Palmley's point earlier, what we're actively doing at the moment is trying to join up internally to understand, well, what other pots of money have we got that we could put towards supporting some broader placemaking aligned to longer term goals. So, you know, if roading, if parks and recs already have some budgets there that are allocated towards the north end or in that area, is there an opportunity to work together? So we haven't yet started, but we've just started having internal conversations. And I suppose the key about the North End one is there is money, there's a significant roading budget there from Waka Kotahi that has to be spent by next March. So it can be invoiced by the end of the fiscal. If they're digging up the roads and there's a lot of disruption, it kind of would make sense to be saying, well, what else could we be doing from a placemaking perspective around that opportunity? So that's kind of what we're looking at just now, but that all has to be worked through with stakeholders and with the local community. Yeah. And that could be a good one for our community engagement discussion.
The original project which we put into the LTP was, I think, $70,000 for them to do work in the North End, come up with a plan. It's generally seemed to be, you know, quite a long stretch getting through there with the 2 lanes rather than 4 lanes. But yeah, we just have not done anything very much in the way of beautification along that, and there's the opportunity to actually make it a much more, much nicer stretch of Oamaru, and particularly for the locals who live out in that part of our town. So that was the intention, and if it can be stretched even further because this other money can come into it, then that's a very positive thing.
Yeah.
Do anyone else have their hand up? Councillor Cowles? And then back to Councillor Thompson.
You know, just further with that placemaking, and I know that I've had the discussion, but it's not a huge pot of money, and I'd just be really concerned. You know, we've got a shovel-ready project that is sitting there ready to go, and if we miss the opportunity to link that up because we're taking too much time, I'd be really concerned that it's going to cost a lot more to re-establish the contractors that are there and to try and finish a project that they're there and ready to go working on it as we currently speak. So I'd hate to think that what's not a really large pot of money is some of it gets chewed up because we're not nimble enough.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Oh, sorry, Councillor Thompson did say you.
I do have a question this time, Mel, through you, Mr. Chair. Do you think the most successful model in ED is to engage and empower the people who come to us with ideas, or is it more successful for us to tell them what they should do to be successful?
I think that is a very good question. And
how long did you think of that one?
What I would...
So Mel, before you answer
Yeah,
I mean, as Councillor Thompson knows, and we've got transformation discussion later, that part of the model that we want to move to is a much more engaging, empowering approach in everything that we do, including economic development. And we've started that with some of the placemaking work in working with communities. And we are looking at how we engage in our long-term plan. And that's outlined in the communications report as well. So it's a very good question. We need to keep asking ourselves, are we doing this in the transformed way that we intend to get to?
Can I just also build on that, Mr. Palmley? Because I know there was a discussion last week and we talked about strategic doing. Strategic doing, which is all about collaborating and working with businesses and the community on shared outcomes. And it's sharing your assets, sharing your resources to get to those outcomes quickly. We delivered the Inspire Waitaki through a strategic doing approach. In 3 months, we turned that whole program around. We've now got a website set up. We've got a logo that's not been developed by the comms team. It's been developed by a designer at AccuCut because they were sitting around the table. That's the way we need to work to go forward. We need to, the strategic doing principles are really strong if they're well executed. We've got 9 people in the district who've all been trained in strategic doing, 3 facilitators, myself included, Cara and Andrea, as well as Rebecca McElray, who's coming in to support. But we've also had 6 other people, including Chloe, have just done the training. And they're so enthusiastic about the opportunity that it presents for us to work differently. So I think that is the way we have to do that with placemaking, with all of the ED work, because with 2 people or 3 people, we can't do it any other way. So, yeah.
No, thank you for that. And I thought that tomorrow afternoon, for example, is a very good example of where the industry is driving something that we can go along for the ride.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move to communications updates. We've had Sonia respond to them already, but is there any other specific questions in the comms update? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, hang on, just bear with me for a minute. I have.
Can you put your microphone on so at least the camera's looking at
Yes,
you?
no,
thinking.
I was heartened to see under other media and communications, the final paragraph, we are working on council guidance for applying the Plain Language Act 2022, ensuring that all council communication and documents are accessible to as wide an audience as possible. This is alongside an updated social media policy as part of a wider audit of our social media channels and how best to use them to communicate with the public. My question is, would you think we want to use plain and simple words to reach as many people as possible? We also want to look at our social media to make sure it's working as we want it to. Would be a good example of plain language.
Yes, I agree. Thanks very much. We're going to send our plain language guide around to councillors for a bit of feedback in that way. You can road test it for us, but thanks. Yes, I agree.
So if 90% of us understand it, it's probably about there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Know your audience.
Councillor McCain.
Look, just going back to the ED side of things, I think it's very important, or to my mind, that at the bottom of page 52, there's a very good summary of where the financial things are heading right now. And it's a comment more than anything, but I think we should take that all on board totally, because the on-flow effect to the town from the rural will actually knock our economy around for the next 2 or 3 years. That's just a comment. And the other thing I'd also like to say, I think these briefings are good, but actually a wee bit of financial history of where the council is actually sitting now with its expenditure. I know we get it through the power group, but just a little bit of what we owe, or what we've got in the bank, or just a snapshot of where we are would be very helpful.
I mean, that is very thoroughly reported through the Performance Audit and Risk Committee. So, this is additional information, because equally we could ask for more detail on a bunch of things that come to us separately through to council or the roading subcommittee or whatever. So, I don't want to make it even longer. We've got 6 minutes left and 3 updates still to finish off. Making it even longer wouldn't necessarily help that timing. But do we have anything else in the comms area? Okay, thank you very much, Mel and Sonia. Appreciate that. And now we'll go to the grants and awards subcommittee, grants allocations during 2022. And I was going to go to the chair, but do you want to say something first, Governance Advisor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, the 2022 report for the whole year is a piece of work that was omitted during the 2022 year, and we discovered that during a Lagoima response. And so we've plugged that gap, and this was also mentioned and promised in a Lagoima response to a requester earlier in the year. So it's just making sure that our records are up to date. And then the 2023 one is the first quarter of this year, and we are now proposing that there will be an update on the grants every quarter in the COW event. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, just going to the chair of the subcommittee, Councillor Ryan, do you want to add any comments on if we look at both of the the 1.8 and 1.9, which are both grants awards subcommittee.
I don't have a whole lot to add. We continue to get quite a large number of applications and far more than we have funding to give out, but there's been some really worthwhile causes coming through. Happy to answer any questions where I can, although some of them predate my time, and I'm sure Councillor Holding, as a previous chair, will be able to answer those.
Fair comment, and note that we do have the Heritage and Biodiversity Funds, which Mr. Cook has some oversight with as well. So did you want to make a comment, Mr. Cook?
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to draw attention actually to the quantum of them. When I did the total for 2022, we allocated $154,111 of council funded money and 50,000 from external funds that we received. So that's a substantial sum of money. And you look at the list of the number of organisations that benefit there, I think it's quite spectacular. And July to September 23, we've already allocated 58,000 of council funding and 19,000 of external funding, which we received for allocation. So that's well over 70,000 already, and we've still got a number of rounds to go, obviously, in this financial year. So it really is supporting our communities.
Yeah, no, I can't help but make comment that these are a lot of the groups and so on that are doing such wonderful work that the Ratepayer group described as wasting money, frittering it away to this group and that group. I think there's a heck of a lot of good that comes from these grants that are made, and when you look at the range of organisations, the different purposes that they have, the benefit they bring to our community, the care that they give to our people, and the gaps that they fill that central government doesn't fill. This is really important, and I 100% still uphold the situation that we need to continue doing this work because it does make a huge difference in our community. Councillor Hopkins, you had something else.
Yeah. Look, just a couple of questions, particular ones. On page 66, there's a reference to the Age Concern Otago, Waitaki coordinator for an accredited visitor service, for which we provided 5,000. I was under the impression there was an earlier instance way back in the day where a similar sort of request was initially funded out of grants, but then the policy indicated that it couldn't be. So if somebody could explain a little about that, I'd be grateful. And the other thing on the next page, page 67, this Creative Community Scheme, there's two examples there, Music Theatre Oamaru and the Civic Trust, where we've paid out more than they asked for. And I'm just curious to know why that is and whether that's a wise thing to do, given that there are so many people asking for a share of what Roger and Rebecca have both said is a pretty small cake.
I could maybe shed some light on the Creative Communities as a central government fund to do the arts. It's a one-off grant a year that has to be used or not, and the committee can decide if they want to give extra help to maybe advertise an event, or if they haven't quite enough and they think it's going to have a wider reach for the arts, then they're entitled to do that. It wouldn't fit with the grants and award criteria though. And maybe in respect to the other one, I think the role there that you're speaking to was maybe getting a staff based in Oamaru to serve out as a district-wide service from Otago, but I think it would have fit in within the policy.
Thank you. That's Deputy Mayor Howler Laley.
Just a question through the chair. Do we know, like with some of the external funding that we receive, like from creative communities, is there a shift towards multiple year funding just to give some community groups a bit more sustainability moving forward? So just a question, like a lot of, like the other organizations are moving towards multiple year, and just to make things a bit more easier, they're not having to reapply every single year for funding. So I'm just wondering if that shift has been considered, even for our own ones as well.
Go for it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll take that as an action point back to the current secretary of that fund. I haven't heard anything, any shift on that, but that one has its own criteria. It comes down from central government. So it's got its own criteria. So if there is a change in the criteria, that would be then when we could change our process. So I'll follow it up and come back to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's always good also just to encourage, like the change instead of waiting for central government. It's like, this is what our communities need. This is what is helping to support wellbeing in our communities, and they're small, very little administrative, like kind of staffing. It's all volunteer in kind contribution, and this is what would help them. So it's just, putting our best foot forward.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is that the sort of feedback that you are hearing, Madam Deputy Mayor, is from some of your groups?
Definitely. There's no leverage for community, like groups that are really small and heavily reliant, and they're always getting 1 year, type of funding. So anything that would help them with even 2+, COGS, like Community Trust Otago, they're already in that stage where they're multiple years. So it's just something for the committee to consider.
Thank you. I'll follow that up. And through you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Note that reference was to Councillor Ryan.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Any curly questions for Councillor Holding in particular? Getting him to remember back to the early 2022. Okay, there's none. So there's 12 o'clock. So with that, we'll call this particular session over. Thanks very much to everyone who's been participating, all those members of staff who have put together these reports and who fronted up today to answer a range of questions, and to any members of the public who watched the live stream. Hopefully you have found it useful.